Welcome back to Life's Cholent. My name is Avital, and I'm so excited for today's video because it is the start of a new series on this channel. I've had the pleasure of doing a number of different series on my channel, beginning with each week's Torah portion, or Parsha, and I did that series for an entire year. And then this past year, I have been doing videos on introduction to Judaism, on prayer, and now I'm going to be starting a series on the Jewish life cycle. The Jewish life cycle is so central to Judaism because we really are a religion of life and a religion that celebrates and values each and every milestone in life. And so from conception all the way to the afterlife, I'm really excited about this series to dive deeply into each and every phase of life. And while in Judaism we believe that life begins with conception, I'm actually going to start this series with birth, and then ultimately when I get to pregnancy we will talk about conception and whatnot. But today we are starting with birth, and in order to properly talk about this huge milestone in Jewish life, I am very excited to welcome a special guest, Chanie, who is an obstetrics nurse, and she also founded Yoledet Academy on Instagram, which is a wonderful page of resources to educate Jewish women about childbirth, about the options that they have going into the whole experience, to make them more knowledgeable, to give them that power that they need to go into the whole experience more calmly and more confidently. Chanie speaks so wonderfully about what the Jewish view is on childbirth, the different traditions, the rituals, and the rationale behind those things. And so I think it's really a fascinating interview, and I'm so excited for you all to see it. Welcome back to Life's Cholent. My name is Avital, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Chanie, who is an obstetrics nurse and also the founder of Yoledet Academy, which is currently on Instagram. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you. So before we really jump into the meat of today's discussion, I was curious as to why you decided to become an obstetrics nurse and a little bit of the backstory of how you got to be where you are today.
So actually, I have 4 children, and I only became exposed to the whole maternal health field when I actually got pregnant with my first child. And I did not have a very good birthing experience with my first. Objectively, everything went well. I didn't have any complications or anything, but I felt like I was not treated well, not by my provider, not by the care in the hospital that I got. And it was at that point that I decided that I became more and more interested in everything having to do with maternal health, newborn care, parenting, and I started the journey into a second degree as a nurse, specifically with the intention of becoming a labor and delivery nurse, kind of in order to treat women with the honor and respect that they deserved when they were having a baby themselves. Knowing that I was in my most vulnerable place when I was giving birth, and I came away remembering everything so clearly. I wanted to give women that positive experience as well.
That's really amazing. And so that was a great explanation of why you went into obstetrics. And then in terms of Yoledet Academy and the education you do with Jewish women, what brought you to start that component as well?
So, I love to talk, and I have friends and my husband, they kept encouraging me. They said, you should start one of those Instagram accounts that, they educate about this and that. And I kept having imposter syndrome. No, I don't know anything. But the more I was on social media, the more I saw that there was literally no one that was an observant Orthodox Jewish healthcare professional that was doing specifically maternal health education. There are so many beautiful accounts on infertility support, on mental health support, and education, and on other areas. But until I start, around the time that I started, there were 1 or 2 other female obstetricians that started an account. But before then, there was really nothing. I was shocked because I think Jewish observant women probably have one of the highest birth rates from most populations. And it was surprising to me that there was nothing like this.
That's really cool that you did that. And I'm so glad you did. As I was saying a little bit before the interview began, for me, it was quite surprising as I'm starting the series on the Jewish life cycle, and birth and, childbirth is such a huge milestone, and there's so little information out there about sort of the Jewish perspective on childbirth. So 2 questions, I suppose, but I'll do them one at a time. First of all, do you think that it's sort of in the Jewish circles in particular, that there is less education surrounding childbirth and the different options that women have? Or do you think it's like a general problem that's not talked about enough?
So it's interesting because I think that there are 2 extremes. Mm-hmm. One extreme are people who are very health oriented, and they advocate for themselves, and they do take childbirth education courses. And the other extreme, which I find probably is a larger percentage of women, is where they kind of just go with the flow. I think that because everyone around them is having babies, they may have several siblings that have had babies already, or have many. They, will have aunts and friends, that they think they can just get that information from everyone around them because there's such a large tribe of people having babies. So I feel like maybe that's why there's a large population of people of women, Jewish Orthodox women, who just kind of take that for granted and think, yeah, I'll go with the flow. Or I think that because so many women are having babies in our society, it looks like it's just so easy and simple. And people say, oh, she did it and she did it and she did it. They came out just fine. I'll come out just fine too. Meanwhile, they don't hear the little ins and outs and the little, things that happened during the pregnancy, during the birth, or, things that could have been prevented. And I was hearing that from women telling me their stories, because every time anyone finds out I'm a labor and delivery nurse, that's it. And they have to spill all of their stories to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this shouldn't have happened. Thinking in my head, oh my gosh, she didn't get that care that she could have gotten that would have been better if she'd only have known this. And then they were all spreading inaccurate information to each other too. So that's been my personal encounter.
Well, it's great that you are helping change like that misinformation and helping educate women. Does Judaism in particular, does it give you a unique perspective on the field that you are in, on obstetrics, on childbirth, on pregnancy, on postpartum? Does that sort of lens you have from a religious standpoint change the way you view your patients, or change the way you view the whole birthing process?
Yes, in many ways. The first that comes to mind is because in Judaism there are so many rituals and so many traditions surrounding birth. And especially some of them may seem strange to someone who's not affiliated. When I have patients from other cultures and who have other traditions, I'm really interested in that. I love to hear the different practices that other cultures have, that other heritages have. And I think that I have a special way that I can just really honor it, because I understand that deep connection of religion and culture to birth. So I'd say that that's one of the first things that come to mind. But it's also interesting because I find anyone who works in any obstetric discipline will tell you that there's so much unknown, so much unknown. And, science has really, in the field of obstetrics, been lagging behind than so many other sciences. With all the research, we still can't pinpoint why someone goes into preterm labor, why one preemie baby survives and the other doesn't, why there are so many things that we still don't know. And there are 3 keys. Chazal say that there are 3 keys that only God, that only Hashem holds, and one of them is to life. And I really do see it in obstetrics. It's very interesting, but we really, there's just so much unknown that doctors will tell you, yeah, like we're all just holding our breaths and hoping, yeah, that it'll work out. And so it's interesting.
Absolutely. I think definitely it can help you with other cultures and with sort of faith in the whole process, since there are so many unknown factors. So you spoke of that Judaism has a lot of rituals or traditions surrounding childbirth. Can you expand on that a little bit, talk a little bit about what they are, and just share with us some of those different traditions?
Well, firstly, beginning of pregnancy, there are different things that one prays for in different trimesters. And there's just a lot of mysticism. There are like good omens. Like, for example, there is a special book. It's called the Noam El-Melech, and it's traditionally placed under a woman's pillow to give her an easier labor. I don't know exactly what the backstory of it is. There are some hospitals that have, I don't work in a hospital with a very large Jewish presence, but there are some hospitals that do have like a whole bunch of them, like on the unit, because all the women that come into labor, oh yeah, here's one, it's like kind of part of the supplies of the unit. There is, when the baby's born, definitely a lot of traditions and commandments, right? So there is a blessing that is made both on a baby girl and a baby boy, two different ones. On a baby boy, it's Hatov U'Mitiv. On a baby girl, it's Shehachiyanu. There is, of course, the naming part where the baby's not named right away. The baby is named for the baby girl during a day that there is Torah reading in shul, so that's 3 days a week plus Shabbos. And for a baby boy on the 8th day during his birth, if he's healthy. Yeah, so that's interesting because, a lot of times nurses will say to someone who's religious and giving birth, oh, what's the baby's name?
Right.
They'll be like, no name yet. Those are the first things that come to mind. There's definitely more. There's, of course, the whole family purity laws of nida, and how a woman becomes nida after she gives birth. And again, that ties in with the whole, just tradition surrounding birth, where I respect other cultures because we have so many different traditions and commandments and rules that we follow. And it does seem strange to a lot of people, and I completely understand it, when a man can't give a hug and a kiss to his wife right after delivery for all the work that she did. And it's definitely something that I field a lot of questions about at work when there are patients who are religious. We don't have that many. And sometimes it's difficult for the staff, when they see that, they feel like it's uncaring. So when I explain the back end of it, I think it gives them more context.
Absolutely. I love that answer. I think it does help a lot. The main things I could find about Judaism and birth were actually case studies, interviewing different Jewish women, sort of because of what you were saying, that they have a lot of children historically. And it was also talking about how, hospital workers might be afraid of how the husband is interacting with his wife, that he's not showing affection or all these things because they don't understand the cultural elements. So you touch a little bit. So we have prayer and we have naming the baby. So during the birth itself, let's talk a little bit about who might be in the room. So you might have the husband, you might have other women supporting. Who do you typically see as like the support? Is that different from other communities, or is it something that you find to be pretty similar?
So because there is that piece of nida, where at a certain point in labor, and there are different halachic authorities that deem at different times when that is, because toward the end of labor, oftentimes a husband won't be able to touch his wife anymore according to Jewish law. Many times there is a female additional support person that comes, either in the form of a doula or the laboring woman's mother, or whoever she's comfortable with. And I do find that is definitely more common in some subcultures, though, because it's interesting, not in all. I do see a lot of times where the woman just comes with her husband. most times husbands do stay in the delivery room for the actual birth. There are some differences in opinion surrounding that too, actually, which again, like you said, can seem very strange to the staff and can seem cold, or like the father's removed, or like it's some kind of patriarchal system where woman is not respected or honored. And somebody explained to me actually that one of the reasons for this is because when a woman is giving birth, she can also poop. She can defecate. I'm sorry, I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I just say it all. So you can't pray during that time in the room, right? You can't pray in the bathroom. So because prayer, and I forgot to mention that, prayer is one of the most integral parts of birth. During the actual birth, a woman's life is considered to be in grave danger, literally, and prayer, and most of the time that's what the father will be doing. He will be praying very hard because he can't hold his wife's hand anymore. And I don't know what you've read in the case studies, but I do see how women feel extremely supported by that. So when a woman is giving birth, the husband is still praying, but he goes outside the room. Now, in many other subcultures, the husband does stay in the room. He's not allowed, because the woman is nida, he is not allowed to see the area from where the birth happens. So he will typically stand at the head of the bed, either facing the mother's face, or even, just not facing her face, but he won't see exactly where the baby's coming out from, but then he'll see how, right when the baby comes out. But again, prayer, I didn't mention that before, but prayer is a huge, huge, huge part of a Jewish birth experience. And so much so that I've seen many other cultures, I've never seen the extent of prayer that happens in a Jewish birth. And, I can think of one time where a patient of mine who's actually religious, her baby started going into distress right before the baby was born, and like the heart rate was really going down. There was a whole team that ran in, and both her mother and her husband were there. They both took a step back. They let the medical team do whatever we needed to do to get that baby back where the baby was supposed to be, and the baby did do well after. But they really just took a step back, stepped away, which was great too, because a lot of times family will be like overbearing and like on top and like, what's going on? They took that step back and they were just praying and they were saying Tehillim. And it was really, it was so beautiful, because they knew that they were powerless to do anything else, and that being anxious and nervous and, hovering wouldn't be helpful. It was really, really one of, a beautiful memory that I have from a Jewish birth, with the amount of prayer that goes on.
That's really beautiful. Does the mother have prayers that she says while she's in labor and as she gives birth? Does she pray, or it's primarily the people who are around her, surrounding her, creating that environment?
Everyone is different. Yes, some mothers pray. There are actually special psukim that a mother that is recommended for a mother to say during labor, but a Jewish mother who cannot pray during labor should not feel bad because it's very hard to be, paying attention to anything other than the actual labor. So I see it more as the support team. And then some families will be close knit and everyone will be calling each other and telling each other, oh, she's in labor, daven for her, daven, and then as soon as the baby's born, like the phone calls, again, also the phone calls is a huge thing that I see in Jewish births, more so than many other births. And I guess because people have so much family, but everyone is calling, Mazel tov, she had a baby girl. Mazel tov, he had a baby boy. She had a baby boy, tell this one and that one and pull that one and that one. Especially that it's more common not to announce genders, even though more and more people find out, but it's actually a lot less common to announce the gender during pregnancy. So everyone is really waiting in anticipation for that. I actually forgot to mention two other major things culturally surrounding birth in Judaism is timing of birth, which means that induction of labor is something that is only done if absolutely medically necessary. So if a woman's doctor says to her, like, there's a medical necessity, it's safer for your baby to come out at this time and not to continue the pregnancy, then that is something that Jewish law always allows, because Jewish law always looks at the medical, to trust medicine and science. And if a doctor recommends something and says that something is safe, even if it's quote unquote in violation of Jewish law, it's really not. But you can't have a convenience induction because you just don't want to be pregnant anymore. Because there are several reasons, one of them being because God is the one that holds the key to life, and he is the one that ordains the exact moment that a soul comes into the world, and we shouldn't mess with that. And also because you're putting a mother actually in danger. You're giving her medications and you're putting her in that labor. So you're putting her in danger. So we only want to do that if it's necessary for her health and the baby's health. Also, with C-sections, with surgery, again, that is just something that is, a woman cannot have an elective C-section surgery because it's major surgery, and it's, it's wounding the body, right? It's harming the body, so to speak. So again, unless it's absolutely necessary and recommended by a doctor, a woman may not harm her body, put her body actively in harm, so to speak.
I'm really glad you mentioned those two things, because I think those are very interesting, and I hadn't heard those. But it does make sense in the sense of God's timing and doing everything you can to keep a woman healthy and not to put her or the baby into unnecessary risks. So I'm very glad that you mentioned those. What ways, I know that outside of the Jewish world, there are a lot of different birthing techniques, like hypnobirthing is something that has had popularity, or, there are people who want to do all natural, or there are people who want to do, music the whole time, different things. What way, I suppose specifically in Judaism, but in general also, might spirituality or faith or religion help a woman through birth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout the entire pregnancy, it's a huge time of prayer because, for the mother's well-being and for the baby's well-being. And I mean, my personal experience has been a lot of connection to God when I was pregnant. First of all, it is an awesome privilege to be able to be a vehicle to bring a soul into the world, just that. And the state of pregnancy and birth does put a woman's life at risk. So it is a time when a woman is more dependent on God because she knows that she's in a more vulnerable state. So definitely, I think that for many, it is a greater connection to God.
Well, that's great. And you touched a little bit about this earlier, but as a more general question, you've seen many births. You've been there for many births. What perspective might you have on life that people who don't have that opportunity, wouldn't be privileged to have? What has it brought in your life that you maybe see through a different lens because of your experiences?
I think that because I see so much vulnerability in humanity, it's kind of, first of all, it's a privilege because I feel like we have our own little world where we share all these secrets with our patients. We have women coming in, we know their entire medical history. We know, things that they've experienced that would not be known to even people that are close to them, be it certain illnesses, miscarriages, abortions, which Judaism, they are in certain times and circumstances allowed and even encouraged in Judaism itself. But I think just seeing so much vulnerability from day to day, I think has helped me be more of a vulnerable person to others. I think I just see beauty in it, and everyone's got their thing, and we really are keepers of a lot of secrets in the labor room. And just seeing a person in their most primal state. I have women apologizing to me after, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I was like so out of control, like an animal and like whatever. And it's so routine and normal to me. It doesn't even like touch me. Mm-hmm. So maybe also that piece where I'm just like not judgmental at all anymore of people going out of control. You do whatever, I've never seen it all. I will never see it all because it's just something crazy. It happens every day new again. But I think it's really lent like a a certain sensitivity to me.
I love that. That's really incredible. So I should mention also before I continue, but for women who are pregnant, they definitely should check out Yoledet Academy on Instagram to be able to see your wonderful videos and posts that you do, which are so informative and helpful. To the general public, to women specifically who maybe are pregnant or going into labor for the first time or who have done it, what would you like them to know? What's something that, like a message that you really would love them to take away from this or from our conversation?
So my mission is to educate women, and that the more you know, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have, the more questions you know to ask about things that you would never even know you needed to ask about, the better chance you'll have of finding a good provider that you will trust and that will be a good messenger for your care. But also always make sure that the information that you get is from a reliable source, because today we have the opposite problem that we used to have, where there was a dearth of information. Now there is an overload of information, and it really can confuse people, and it can make them even more anxious because they hear so much conflicting information from different people. And again, this is my mission of educating people. This is the real deal, okay? If you lift your hands over your head, your baby's cord will not wrap itself around the neck, and all of those things. If your baby is big, like the doctor says, you can still have a beautiful vaginal delivery and you don't need to be induced. These are all things that people will hear differently. So make sure that you're getting it from a credible, reliable source. And thankfully, we do have now credible sources on social media, but make sure that it's from a credible source and not just from like some influencer, fashion influencer who, had a birth and decided something.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And it's true, like they say, knowledge is power, but really it can, I think, really change a woman's experience in this whole process to have like good information. And as you talked about earlier, maybe somebody has a sister or a mother, and then I think that's going to be their experience. But as you also said, each and every birth is different, and there's something to see there. So you're definitely the expert here. What am I missing? What else should we share with people? Is there anything else I'm missing on like the Jewish aspects of birth, or just let me know if there's anything that I didn't cover.
I think that you covered a lot. I mean, there's probably so much more that I can't think of at the moment, but I was going to talk a little bit about prenatal testing, where here's another thing. This is what I'll tell you. Because there is a lot of Jewish law involved and many nuances in medicine, another mission of mine is to give women the information that they need in order to bring to their halachic authority, to their Jewish law authority, so that they can get the most accurate interpretation of the Jewish law as it applies to their individual and specific situation, because it is very dependent on specifics, especially in medicine. So I think that is probably another thing that's really good to keep at the forefront, where the education is not just going to make you feel more empowered and more confident going in and feeling like an active participant in your birth instead of some passive person that people are doing things to, but also make sure that you have all of the information to bring to your rabbi in order to get the most accurate halakhic, guidance. So that's the last thing that can come to mind right now. I'm sure once we finish this interview, I'll probably think of 10 other things.
That's always how it works.
Yeah. But I think that these are really main points that are good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really good for people to know where that they can go to get both Jewish halachic information and about the birth process specifically. Did you want to touch on the prenatal the prenatal testing, or not?
I mean, it's a long conversation, but one of the things relating to the halachic authority and everything like that is that there used to be this misconception. There still is a very widespread misconception that people shouldn't do most of the prenatal testing. because the assumption is the only intervention would be abortion, and they're not going to do that anyway. But that's not true. This misconception arose because years ago, the prenatal testing was not as accurate. We did not have nearly as much technology and interventions as we do today. So a lot of people forego important testing in the first trimester, especially, that can really be beneficial to them for a variety of reasons. And abortion is not the only intervention. However, sometimes abortion is actually halachically, in certain circumstances, halachically recommended. It really depends, if it's a pregnancy where the mother's health is at risk and she's maybe carrying a baby that's not going to be viable, or that's not going to be viable for a very long time. These are all individual situations that need to be discussed with the rabbi, but there is definitely a place for prenatal testing, for preparation, for knowing where to have the baby in case that there are any problems that the baby may need surgery for and may need access to a high-level neonatal critical care unit. These are all circumstances where the prenatal testing would help, and it gives us more information. It's never diagnostic, but it does give us important information, and it's really important to speak with your provider to figure out, well, why am I having this testing? What would I do with the results of this testing? If they came out positive, what are the interventions? So that you understand that it's not this misconception that the only thing is abortion, and that, they'll tell you the wrong thing. You'll hear a lot of people saying, yeah, and I heard this story where they told woman the wrong thing and she refused to have her child aborted, and then her child was born normal. That's not how it works. There's no definites. There's no black and white. It's all statistics. But the more testing you have, the more statistics you can get. And of course, there's also the genetics piece where just getting pregnant. We used to have Sharim, which tests for a bunch of genetic diseases. But there are also now other companies that are specifically geared toward the Jewish population and testing for other genetic conditions, where if both the mother and the father have it, the baby may be born with a genetic disease. It doesn't affect just the father or just the mother, but if the baby gets both the mother and the father's gene, then they can have it. But there are lots of interventions around it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has no hope of having a relationship and having a family with someone that they want to have the family with. It's also probably a long conversation that requires its own episode. But I think just awareness to know all these things and to know that they're not out of the bounds of halacha.
Absolutely. I find that fascinating. It's quite amazing. I think you're absolutely right that it deserved its own episode entirely. And my intention, at least, I'm sort of starting with birth, but as I progress through the life cycle, pregnancy and pre-pregnancy, preconception, all of that is going to be something I really want to talk about. So I would love to have you back to talk about that, to give it the attention that it really deserves. Well, thank you so much. It has been truly a pleasure to learn from you and to hear from you. I think that the work that you are doing with Yoledet Academy is incredible and such a wonderful mission. So thank you for doing it. And I'm sure all the other people who are benefiting from your knowledge are also very grateful. And if you're not following Chanie already, it's Yoledet Academy on Instagram. So please go ahead and follow her and send some support her way. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor.
Thank you.